1 minute. Okay, so we're looking at John Wheeler tonight, and we're reading from You Were Never Born.
Oh, nevermore. I got that. Right.
Yeah, so for those that have the book, I'm on page 256. So it's just a few pages at the end. Okay,
The beginning of the book.
so
We're on page
Page are we on?
256. 256.
256.
so here's John, and this is what he says. Let's try to tie it all together now. You are already totally free. There is nothing wrong with you. You are already that intrinsic reality and always will be. There is not a damn thing wrong with you, and there's nothing you need to do. You can walk out this door at any time, and you are never anything except that pure freedom. Your nature, your real being, is simple, undeniable presence awareness. It is not a separate person. The separate person is born in thought as a concept. Then we see that all that suffering is simply concepts about a fictitious self. It survives through belief. It depends upon the notion that there is a distinct, separate self in our experience. That is all that's happening. Then you take a step back and realize that it is all a conceptual construct based on an erroneous view, a mistaken idea. What gets pointed out is that there is no evidence that you stand as a separate being apart from present awareness. You cannot find a separate I in the picture at all. So we need to have a look and examine to see, where is this I, this me, that is the root of all our problems, all our troubles? What I would like to say is that suffering has a cause. But when you search for the cause, you find that it does not exist. When suffering arises in our experience, it is now recognized as thoughts. They are clearly seen to be about a separate self. Right out of the gate, you are able to recognize and appreciate that the very root of the mechanism is not valid. Is there any evidence of a separate self? A self separate from this presence awareness? If so, where is it? Did you ever find it? All these things are there for you to see for yourself. At one point, it just dawned on me. I thought, here I am, present and aware. There's no doubt about it. There is no way I am separate from that awareness. I could see that as clear as day. I would see some thoughts, feelings, perceptions go through. That's all that I could see. I was looking at all this and thinking to myself, so where Where is this separate self? Where is John Wheeler, the entity, the one who has all the problems and doubts? I see thoughts come and go, but I do not see any evidence that those thoughts are who I am. It is the same with feelings and sensations. As you look in your direct experience, all that you see are some thoughts, feelings, and sensations going through. So this person that we have taken ourselves to be is not really present in direct experience. It's only an assumption. The mind has created this notion, but there is nothing to substantiate it. We cannot discover any particular thing that is this separate self, separate from awareness. You could say that the thought I is present as a thought, but that is a thought. It's not who you are. You are the awareness that knows that thought. The thought comes and goes. Even if you are not thinking that thought, you are perfectly fine. As we sit here right now, all there is this presence of awareness. There may be a few things appearing in that, but none of it is separate from awareness. The root of all suffering, psychological suffering, is the notion that I stand apart from this intrinsic awareness. That belief in separation feels limited. It creates a sense of being incomplete. It fuels the search to define what that assumed person might be. But come back to present experience, and you will see that you have never been a separate being. You are being itself. You have never stood apart. Therefore, the basis of all conceptual psychological suffering is just simply invalid. To view things from this perspective basically takes care of the root of the problem. What can happen then? After that, can possibly ever happen to you is that the mind can generate residual habits from the past. They used to come up a lot, so they might resurface in the mind, but they do not touch awareness. They are just a mechanical residual effect, like a spinning potter's wheel. Once the power is shut off, it is just an impersonal happening. And chances are that because there is less and less belief in them, they will resolve and take care of themselves. There will be less and less present to worry about. A lot of teachings hint about self-knowledge and the truth of who we are. But then they push you right back into the practices, the techniques, the gurus, the future attainments, and so on. So they have got you back into the mind again, thinking you are not yet whole and complete. Sailor Bob was one of the few that would say, this is what it is. There's nothing else. Or he used to say, there is nothing beyond no thing. You see this for yourself, and you are basically done with it. You are not going to get a practice or a promise of enlightenment in the future. Who needs that when you are already what you are seeking? I can say with full confidence that this way of looking was absolutely able to resolve all my remaining doubts. There is no doubt about it. Things like karma or rebirth, all the traditional doctrinal concepts are still in reference to the imagined entity. The clear view of things knocks out the interest in a lot of that stuff. If you think, I have still got to do this, I've got to do that, well, that only applies if you are a separate I. If you are pure awareness, which is intrinsically free from nature, then you do not have anything, then you do not have any need to do anything at all. Who is there to do anything if there is no person present? So all of the spiritual concepts come tumbling down. It is all based on speaking to the assumed entity. Tibetan Buddhism, it is said that Buddha's highest and most profound teaching was a direct pointing to our innate nature of intrinsic awareness. But if people did not embrace this view, then Buddha gave out various relative teachings. Why? To address the conceptual position that people imagine themselves to be in. But the highest teachings say very clearly that those relative teachings are incapable of yielding lasting freedom. The reason is that they are all based on a false premise. They are only given as a stepping stone for someone who is totally committed to the idea that they are some kind of an entity. But those relative doctrines are not the highest teaching. They are not the central teaching. They are not capable of revealing our innate and ever-present freedom. For that, you must relinquish all concepts, all paths and approaches, and see that here and now you are free, because you have never for a moment been anything other than that pure presence awareness itself. We feel and we believe and we think of ourselves as this separate I, a me, separate from awareness, which is present. You can never not be aware. There is no I, there is no me, there is no entity that is separate from awareness.
Maybe just a second. Um, Isn't it more accurately said that we take ourselves to be individual entities that have awareness? I don't think of myself as separate from awareness. I think of myself as a being that has awareness.
Yes, but that was his point. That sense that I am a being that has awareness makes you that's a being separate from
I
awareness.
understand that.
You-
I understand that, but I just don't, I think, for me anyway, that sentence, when read the first sentence, or what you said,
Which,
that we're set, we think ourselves to be
We-
separate from, that's not
Yes.
my first instinct. My
of
first-
course not.
Right.
Of course not. That's not for none of us.
So
We
I think-
take ourselves as this body and this mind, and we're separate bodies, separate me.
We take ourselves to be separate minds and bodies that have awareness, but that's the fallacy. You can't
Yes.
have awareness.
That's right, because you are awareness.
Exactly, but I think for me, it's better said that way.
No,
The
no, but
first-
then you're back to a separate entity.
Not when you say that that's the error, that you think you have awareness.
Okay, so what are you saying?
For me, his opening point or your opening statement, I wish you could read it. That we're separate from awareness. I don't think most people go around thinking that they're separate for awareness. They think we go around thinking that I have awareness.
Yes, but because it's a separate I that has
I know, but
awareness. And he's saying here, what gets pointed out is that there's no evidence that you stand as a separate being apart from present awareness, which means you can't be a separate being that has awareness. You are awareness.
I understand that. I'm just making the point that I think when you're speaking to an audience, and you say that you take yourself to be separate for awareness, I don't think a lot of people out there say, "Oh yeah, that's what I do. I think I'm separate." I think, but if you said you're a separate being and you think you have awareness,
No, but you're not a separate being. That's what the teaching
Okay.
is saying here.
I know.
And it's saying, actually, what he said here was, go and find that separate I, that separate me. Where is it? Is there a me independent of thought? See, we think that we are our thoughts. We feel that we are our feelings, but we are the awareness that's aware of the thoughts and aware of the feelings. What is that awareness? He's saying, and all the teachings of non-duality say, that's your basic, primary, real nature. That's who you really are, is that awareness.
Hold on, I'm just saying, I think a better hook is to say, you take yourself as a you take yourself as an individual separate from awareness. I don't think that's a very catchy hook, but if you say to somebody, you take yourself as a separate person that has awareness.
Okay.
And that's a fallacy. What do you mean it's a fallacy? Then you can unpack the thing.
Oh,
But
okay.
but if you say to somebody, you take yourself to be separate for awareness, I don't think that registers for people.
Okay, so
But
you,
let's hear what somebody else said.
okay, yes.
Anybody
Oh,
else?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about separate awareness, I, me, all of this. To a person who hasn't been brought up in some kind of spiritual mode, it's all mush mush because we're brought up to respond, to think, to use thought. We grow up being separate from the experience. Well, that's the way we're brought up to think. So at some point, somehow, and Wheeler can get to it, to point out to the fact that, well, this is the way we've been brought up. This is the way we've been taught to think. But think about it. How well is it serving you? How are you free from suffering? Do you worry a lot? Do you have emotional problems? You have problems sleeping? And you can go through the whole litany of things. And I think more or less sneaking through a back door of, okay, if you sit down and think about this thing, eventually you'll find out that you don't have answers for this. And I think what happens is that eventually you get to understand what thought has done. The thinking process has created who you think you are. So, and I think that takes a little bit of work. I don't know if somebody sitting in an audience who hasn't had some kind of exposure is going to believe any of this. I didn't
Well,
believe it for a couple of years. I
yes,
thought the guy was nuts,
okay, but
quite frankly.
what he's saying right now, remember he said, as we're sitting here right now, is there sense of being present and aware? Are you present and aware this very moment? Who would say no? Of course.
Yeah, but somebody always would immediately come in. So what?
All right.
Yeah,
well, then,
okay,
all right.
so what?
So he's saying, don't move away from that right now. Stay
Ah,
with that for a moment.
right.
Stay with it. Do you experience yourself in a direct experience? You having that experience, nobody telling you what to experience, but do you have that experience of being present and aware? Yes. Do you have the experience of seeing thoughts moving across the mind, feelings coming up? Is that something you can recognize?
Of course.
Of course. Well, what is it? You cannot see, you cannot be that which you can see. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it, right? So then, if I see the thoughts passing, then I cannot be those thoughts. What is it that sees the thoughts passing? That we're calling I. I see.
Present awareness.
Present awareness or consciousness sees. You know, that's what Jean Claude told us. He said consciousness functions. So consciousness sees and hears and knows.
There's no I seeing, there's no me seeing, there's just seeing.
Oh,
I
you
think
could.
the problem, I think
So,
the problem is with this idea of a separate self, is that we're talking about the experience that we have is basically through the senses. So even the way you're talking about it, I see, I hear. And so our sense experience actually demonstrates to us that we are a separate self, right? Because what I'm seeing, you're not necessarily seeing. I'm in a different room from you right now, or possibly. Do you know what I mean? So we have this sensual experience that basically shows us that we are in fact separate.
However, what is it that knows even the sensory experience? How?
Awareness.
That's
Awareness.
right.
I agree with you, but and so that awareness is there. But for most of us, the experience of that awareness
mhm.
is still circumscribed by the sensual experience. We still experience the world of creation through the senses. We're having a conversation now through the world of the senses. Yes, there is a backdrop of awareness that has that. But what I'm saying is most of us are experiencing the world through the body,
Yes,
through the
but not separate from awareness. You would never
not
experience.
no, yes, absolutely, I agree with you. Not separate from awareness. Awareness is the backdrop. But what I'm saying is our interaction, the interaction that you and I are having right now, we're having through our senses. We're hearing and listening to each other through our senses. Yes, I'm also experiencing, there is the backdrop for me of awareness.
But yes,
So what's,
but just a minute, but even the hearing and the seeing, what is it that's hearing and seeing? The ear isn't hearing and seeing. The eyes aren't hearing. There's something that's using the ear and the eyes as an instrument through which to see and hear. But if there were,
Absolutely.
right, so if there were not awareness, there would be no seeing or hearing.
Absolutely. But at the same time, if there were no eye and there were no ear, would we hear and would we see?
If there were no eye,
If there were no eyes, the EYES,
if
and
there
if there
were
were
no
no
eyes,
right, and if there were no ears, would we still see and hear? So
well,
No, no.
without those physical senses, as well, we're also not having the experience of seeing and hearing.
well,
Well,
um,
well, our senses, okay, they operate, but we've learned to have the eye do the seeing. Whereas you don't need the eye to do seeing or hearing. You hear, you see, but we've learned to run it through the eye, and that creates problems because the eye
I
doesn't, what?
Yes, I agree, Hugo. That's right. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you still, in order for us to communicate, we have physical ears and we have physical eyes. And that's allowing us to have this conversation right now.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So there are two components. One is the experience through the sensual body of the five senses. The second component is awareness. In most people's experience, those two components are required. In other words, if we closed our eyes and if we disconnected our optic nerve and we disconnected our oral nerves, we wouldn't be having this interaction, despite the fact that we would still be aware.
Yeah,
yeah, so where are you going with this, Chip?
Where I'm going with that is the reason that we're experiencing the world as separate selves is because we have separate bodies that have a separate sense. In other words, I have a physical body that basically extends my five senses into the world. You have a physical body, Paul, that extends your five senses into the world. So what you're able to see and hear right now in the room you're in is different than what I'm able to see and hear in the room that I'm in. So that experience of interacting with the world through our physical body is giving us back the feedback that while, yes, there is awareness, that's certainly a necessary component. It's also for me and for you, possibly, another requirement for us to have this interaction is the physical body using the five senses. So those two things, awareness and the corporality, are both necessary.
Yes, but I thought you were gonna make the point that sharing the world through our separate senses reinforces the sense of a
separate
separate self.
self.
It does. That's exactly the point I'm trying to make.
Right.
Okay, but then he questions in this reading tonight, where is that separate self? You're saying it's in the senses?
No, it reinforces the false sense of a separate
Yes, so
self.
then he's saying, okay, but then look, examine, explore.
Yeah,
Is that true?
yeah.
Are you a separate self indeed, separate from awareness?
No, not separate from awareness, but I'm having a different set of sensual experiences right now than you are. Why is that? In other words, if there's only one self, right, with a capital S, why aren't we experiencing the same interaction with creation?
Okay, well, okay, so we may indeed have, just like, we're all conditioned in different ways. The brain, the mind is conditioned in different ways, right?
Right.
But the sense that I am and the sense that you have, I am, is the same.
Yes.
Your I am and my I am is the same I am. There is no one on this planet that has a different I am. They have different conditioning. They, as Ugo said, they have formed different beliefs and concepts and opinions and judgments, for sure. But what we're trying to get to is, apart from that conditioning, which is based in the brain cells themselves as thoughts and memories, is there a me that's separate from that? No, there's no me that's separate from that. But then what is this me? Is it separate from awareness? There cannot be an I, a me, that's separate from awareness. I am awareness. You are awareness. In fact, we are all the same awareness, even though we've had different conditionings. And that's what he's getting to. And so he wants us to explore, then what is this separate me? What is it made of? And does it even exist separate from thought? Because it's the me that causes our psychological suffering. And most people on this planet are suffering psychologically. That's not to diminish the people that are suffering physically. But where is this separate self that suffers psychologically? Does it exist separate from thought and memory? Does it exist separate from awareness? Does it exist at all?
So Evie, if we are all doctors, say, of non-duality, how do we cure the patient who thinks they are this separate, self, this sort of concretized self? In other words, how do we relieve suffering, our own and others? I mean, how do we do that?
Well,
You
first of
can't
all,
just you can't just walk into an operating room and start operating. You got to learn something. And this is the part I think gets shadowed over. This is a process. You have to do a certain amount of accepting. You got to get to a point. You got to kick this stuff around until you finally, at some point, accept. At least I've tried to, and I think I'm doing as best I can to fully accept it, that I am present awareness. Once you get to the point that you accept present awareness as present awareness and what it is, then everything else comes a little bit easier. Because the way I understand it is, I can't remember, but I understand that when I was born, I didn't have a problem with an I. I didn't have a problem with a me. I didn't have a problem with psychological stuff. The big thing of the day was, where is that tit and where is the milk? That was the big thing of the day. And that's it. And little by little, mama tells me this and mama does that and the environment does this. There are conditions around satisfying what I need. It's primarily milk and maybe
Okay.
sleep.
But hold on,
So-
Ugo.
Back to,
Yeah, but listen, another answer to your question, Bill, is, well, you can point somebody to the direct looking that Wheeler is encouraging people to do. And some people can hear these pointers and look for themselves and get a level of clarity that shatters this illusory self in their experience. And as he said at the close of his teaching here, that for those people who can't get it on a direct looking, then there's
Relative.
other relative approaches
Yep.
the Buddha used to help those people meet them where they're at. Every person has to be met at the level of where they're at. And so that's how you help yourself and perhaps others get clarity. Does that answer your question, Bill?
yeah, it's just, we all know how difficult it is to keep remembering that I am not these sensations, these feelings. Yes, they're happening spontaneously, and I have little or no control over them. But the relief comes perhaps in being able to say to myself, this is not who you are. This is just anger that's occurring, and touch upon it and look at it and feel it and all that, but don't try to act on it. Or this is another feeling of shame that's coming up, and just don't take that to be who you really are, but just to be in touch with it. And
The
then maybe
witness.
through a constant process of desensitization, maybe we start to say, hey, maybe I am not all these habitual things that I've been thinking I have been for the last 65, 70 years,
Yeah. Well, Bill, you just described witnessing, right? Witnessing when shame comes up, witnessing
Yes.
when hurt, right? And then seeing that that's not who I am. It's an object of my perception.
It's an
Yeah.
object of a. What
It
is it
appears in
that
awareness.
is? What is it that knows shame or knows anger? How? If that was who you were, if you are shame, when shame arises and you identify with shame, then that's it. But when shame arises and there is awareness, shines a light on that, and suddenly there's a knowing that there's an arising of shame. Well, then that's can't be who I am, because there's a recognition of it. So then what I find myself doing is saying, what is it that knows this hurt that has arisen? What is it that knows the shame that has arisen? What is it that knows the thought that has arisen? And it's like almost pulling the plug in that moment. And if you keep at it, it becomes very natural.
There's also another
People who pick this up on the first go, they have their first sort of looking within and say, that's exactly right. In other words, is this awakening, if we call it for lack of a better word, is it gradual through many, many years and many, many looks at yourself? Or do some people have this sort of sudden burst of awakening, as described for the Buddha, for example?
Well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends, like Paul said, on where you're at. For some people, it's, like Nisargadatta says, it takes a long time for the fruit to ripen, but when it's ripe, it falls very quickly. But then it depends. There are some people like the guy that wrote Amazing Grace. It happened quickly. Oh, you know, in a second.
Mhm.
But John Wheeler is saying something else here. He's saying you are that right now. You don't have to wait for it to happen. You are that right now. But see what you're identifying yourself with. If you're identifying yourself with your thoughts and feelings, well, then you're losing sight of what you really are.
Chip, I wanted to get back to you. Where did we lose you? Are you still here?
No, I'm still here. I'm just listening to you guys.
Okay, but the point that you would, did we address the point you were trying to make?
Well, I guess you understood the point I was trying to make, which was basically the reinforcement of the notion of a separate self because of the vehicle of the body.
Okay, yes,
Right,
You know,
okay.
right.
and but I think the challenge is the recognition of awareness. But I think then, and Evie's talking, it's sort of bringing it back to this notion of identification. What do we identify with? You know, are we our thoughts? Are we, excuse me, are we our egoic thoughts? Are we our egoic self, or are we something, you know,
Mhm.
beneath that, more foundational than that? And I think that's interesting. I just think somehow we need to have experiences that basically transcend the mind body,
Yes,
experience. And I
yes,
think that's what allows us to start to have an identification with that foundational awareness,
that's right.
recognizing that we don't need the physical body to actually experience that awareness and that self with a capital S.
Well,
Yes.
I thought this was such a well-written presentation. He's so clear, Wheeler, in pointing you to what really needs to be looked at. And it's such a great example of this direct approach that
Yes,
like Sailor Bob
yes,
expounds.
Yes,
yeah,
I agree.
yeah, yeah. And like he says, he talks about himself too,
Mhm.
being full of doubts and worries, problems. There are other parts of this chapter, maybe we'll continue it, that's really very good, when someone asks him about his health and when one is ill. We're not going to go into that now, but I think that's worth looking into, because that's when it's the most challenging, when you have a severe problem with illness, yours or someone whom you love. And how do you stay in the background and not get swept away by the fears and worries? And he says that for him it was being able to see in the moment very clearly that he was not a separate me, separate from that awareness, that he is awareness. That's why awareness can never be an object. It's not something that I have. It's something I am. Well, let's see. Okay.
Okay. Why don't we wrap up for tonight?
Yeah, I think we'll meet again in 2 weeks, but I think in 2 weeks we'll make it in person. We'll still be on Zoom, but we'll make it in person in 2 weeks.
So put it in your
Yoo-hoo.
calendar.
So we'll be coming to see you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Billy, can I have a ride?
Yeah, can you make it out here to Jamesport and we'll go together?
Absolutely.
good,
Good.
We'll have to
good.
get together. Try to get together with Carol.
Yeah,
That would
good.
be nice,
That'll
yeah.
be very nice.
Right. So we'll bring our little group to your group.
Yes,
A
good.
mega group. Great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, guys. Thank you very
Take care.
much.
See you
Thank
soon.
you. See you
you.
later.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Buonasera a tutti. Buonasera.
Ciao.
Let us
Ciao, eh?
down.